American Water Polo.
Hi, this is Damon Newman from American Water Polo, and we're here today with co-head coach Brian Bacharach from Fordham University to better understand the recruiting process. How you doing, Brian?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. I appreciate you taking the time. So tell me a little bit about yourself and more so about Fordham.
Well, I've been at Fordham for for 7 years now. I guess going on 8. First started when I was I was working full time for a real estate company in New York, and started by just helping out Bill Harris, on the nights that I could get out of work early and was available. And it's slowly evolved into me, taking on more and more responsibility, and Bill's been great from that standpoint. And last year we shared the head coaching title, and so now it's something that, from a recruiting standpoint, I've begun to take on more and more responsibility from that standpoint. We this year have shared the responsibilities. I kind of split the recruits evenly, with me focusing a little bit on the 2021s and him a little bit on the 2020s, and then kind of splitting some of the other responsibilities as well from a compliance standpoint, et cetera.
Excellent.
So, and then, I've been coaching for the last, I guess I've been doing it since I was almost 14 years old, but I was more seriously, once I graduated from college, I was coaching at De La Salle High School, where I went to in the Bay Area. And then when I was in graduate school, I spent 2 years helping out as an assistant coach for John Loughran at LMU. So been at the college level for almost 10 years, and the high school level for several years before that, club level. So been pretty much around sport coaching for most of my life.
Excellent. So, your experience obviously as a player and a coach at various high school and college and obviously now at Fordham. How do athletes get recruited? What should they do to promote themselves?
Well, there's at least from our perspective, I'm sure every school has their own different ways in which they identify athletes or go about it. But from our perspective, the kids usually initiate the contact. We will reach out to kids that we know or are somehow we've come into contact with. But I think we started with almost 50 athletes in this past 2020 year, and they all initiated the process with us, I think, with the exception of one athlete. And they're varying levels of those 50 athletes, but I would say of those 50, probably 35 of them we have actively recruited. So we cast a pretty wide net. I mean, and I would say 10 of those were from different parts of the world, outside of the U.S., and a large majority of them are from the U.S., but they also are from all over different parts of the country. On our current team, we have kids from Connecticut, New York, Pennsylvania. We've had kids from Florida. I don't think we have any right now. Texas, Chicago. We recruited a kid from Seattle this past year, Hawaii, and then obviously California as well. So.
Okay. So you've been in your experience, and you're obviously in the process. When do these athletes? When do they generally reach out to you? Obviously, NCAA rules are as such. When would you recommend an athlete, making contact or sending it for that first email?
Well,
that first
I would recommend the earlier the better.
Okay.
But That's not Fordham's luxury. We our friends in the Ivy Leagues and a lot of our California friends that we're competing against seem to lock in their recruiting classes a lot earlier than we do, and that only makes sense. I mean, Fordham is academically considered a step below the Ivy Leagues, so we get a lot of kids who are borderline Ivy League academically that are looking at us, but they want to see if they get into the Ivy Leagues. And then we have kids on the other end of the spectrum. You know, we're a pretty good academic school that are looking to stretch to get into Fordham. And so we fall in the middle there. And then there's the process of going through financial aid, because Fordham is an expensive school, and what is that package going to look like? So it takes a while to get through that entire process. So in terms of answering your question, the earlier we can start that process, the better, because the quicker we can get answers to financial aid packages and admissions and whether or not the student athlete will be admitted. But to answer your question fully, we have kids come in all throughout the process.
Okay.
This 2020 class, which we just had a kid commit yesterday, and it is April 20th or something like that. You know, right up till we've had kids commit on the last day they possibly can, on April 31st, May 1st.
Right.
And I think this past year we had a kid who, when did he committed? Maybe in September, October.
Okay.
So, so we're throughout the entire year. You know, Bill and I always laugh about it because I think the Ivy Leagues start their recruiting process. They're probably fully into their 2021s at this point, whereas we're still closing out our 2020s.
Right.
And so that's just the life cycle of it. But, you know, we're talking to 2021s as well. And we have been since they've been able to back in, I think it starts as soon as they start their junior year. So it starts then for some kids. Some kids don't come to us until, you know, they've heard back from the Ivy Leagues and they're not getting in. So now they're looking at their other options, and they're going to, you know, the application deadline is late December, early January. And so they put in their application then, and then we're going through the process with them for financial aid and everything else and admissions right up until April 30th. So it's you know, we have kids all across the spectrum, and we're just looking for talent. So if talent shows up to us later in the process, we're not going to ignore that kid just because they came to us later on. And if they come to us early on, well, that's nice, because then we know when we have a kid committed earlier, that helps. But yeah, we don't differentiate from that respect.
Okay. Speaking of talent, and how does a high school coach or say a club coach, what's their role in helping an athlete get noticed? You know, obviously you've had years of experience. You've probably built some connections with coaches throughout the country. What's that role like?
Well, you know, the kids usually initiate the process by sending an email usually sending an email is how they initiate the process. We also have some of these recruiting websites that they contact us through, but usually it starts through an email, and that's the best way to get in touch with us. Sometimes it's initiated by a coach. Sometimes it's initiated by a kid. It doesn't really matter to us. We can go either way. And then the best way to get in touch with us is yes, sending an email and a resume of accolades and swim times, etc. but also, game film and highlight films, or full game films, or a quarter of them playing, or whatever it might be. Because, we can go through our checklist of, grades, SAT scores, swim times, size, and all that kind of stuff. But really, when we're looking at an assessment, we've got to be able to see, watch them play. And so that becomes a very important, box to check when we're initiating that process. And then if like I said, if that box gets checked, and we're looking at this kid and he really does look talented, and can get into the school and all that stuff, then we're going to be going to the coaches, and that's where the coaches play a very big role. And between Bill and I, there's very few places in the country that we don't have contacts. I grew up in the Bay Area. I coached in the Bay Area. I know pretty much all the high school coaches. If I didn't play with them, I coached against them, or played against them. And then in Southern California, like I said, I coached there for a few years. Bill's been doing this for 15 years, so he has a lot of relationships down in Southern California as well. And then again, across the country, we know people who we've just both been involved in the sport for 30 plus years. So we do rely on those coaches and the coaches who coach against, those players, and talking to them about, so what's your impression of this kid? How does he handle himself in games? And then obviously talent level and all that too. So.
Right. So talent level and the academic accolades and the ability to get into the school. What are some additional, like maybe some of the character traits you're looking for when you're talking to these PSAs, and some of the things that kind of hit home from you on that kind of with that checklist you're looking at?
Yeah, those intangibles are more important than kids, I think, realize. And they're not going to be the ones that necessarily comes, we're not going to ask them those things, but those come across when you're talking to their coaches, their teammates, kids on our team who have played against these kids, and their impression when they come on their recruiting trips. How do they handle themselves, and what's the impression of the PSA with our existing student athletes? Are they going to be a good team fit? We've definitely walked away from recruits before who just didn't seem like they were going to be a good fit within our program. And then obviously coach rep, the way their coaches speak about them, their high school coaches, their club coaches, is really important. And ultimately, do we want to bring this kid into our family? So it's a huge part of the process.
Right. That sounds like it sounds like you guys have a pretty thorough, list and investigation, and
yeah, it is. I mean, like I said, we cast a pretty wide net.
Yeah.
The net's gotten even wider as I've developed. As Coach Harris and I have shared the responsibilities, we've cast that net even wider because we have more people helping. When it was Bill by himself, it was a little bit more difficult. But now that we're doing it together, it's we really investigate pretty much every kid that emails us to see whether they would be a good fit for our program for a number of different reasons. There's a whole host of reasons why a kid would be a good fit. So.
Right. So with the loss of some, obviously we're in a global pandemic here, and there are some tournaments that are, being postponed or even canceled. What should a PSA do to be seen if they were traditionally at, they were expecting a coach to be at a large tournament that they would traditionally be able to put eyes on them? What would be your recommendation to them?
Well, I guess I could ask that question to you as well, because
Right.
it's messing with a little bit of our plans for the summer to be able to see these kids.
Yeah.
Um, the as I said, the first thing that you can do is put together your film, and work on that portion of it, because clearly we're not going to be able to come to games anytime soon. So the more you're able to chronicle the historical games that you can put together, is helpful, and not just highlights, but because you could show yourself scoring 10 goals, but if it's not against teams that are of the caliber that you're going to be playing against in college, or if it's the only game that you've done that, then it's not really a fair representation. So being able to show a whole quarter or a few quarters of different games are very helpful in that process. And then as soon as things get started again, that being able to just make yourself available at these different tournaments when they become, I know it's not at the best time, being held at the best time, but being able to go to JOs in December. As I said, for us, we'll be looking at 2021s and 2022s at JOs.
So that's in itself actually a flexibility for Fordham, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right? Whereas, that's true. Maybe that'll be an advantage. Some kids are, some schools may not have that luxury because they may have had to have those decisions completed. Right. But and putting your best foot forward at those different times are important. Coming in shape and doing the best you can at those tournaments will obviously ultimately help in terms of recruitment. But and things to do during this time, we're struggling with it. I think all coaches and teams are struggling with it, with no access to pools and no access to traditional weight rooms. You just have to get creative. Right. If you can get into water and do some leg work, or just doing whatever you can to be ready when things do start up again, I think will help a PSA in terms of, like I said, putting their best foot forward when those tournaments do start up again.
Yeah, I think that's a good advice. Just be ready as best as you can, and there are a lot of resources out there being created daily by hundreds of athletic organizations, whether it's water polo or not. There's just we're all
there's a whole host of things that are being created out of this that are really interesting. I mean, I've been daily I get sent stuff. USA Water Polo is doing some things with these interviews of different college coaches, and there's different high school coaches and I think college coaches putting out these seminars talking about half court O, half court D, and all this kind of stuff. I saw some stuff on Total Water Polo that they're doing, and the mental part of the game is a huge part of it, and understanding of the nuances. That's one of the biggest challenges, I think, in jumping from the high school level to the college level. Even when you've played at a high level high school or club, we see a lot of times that there's a learning curve. The game's faster, the game's more sophisticated and complicated, and that is if you can take advantage of this period of time to become more knowledgeable and understanding of those nuances of the game, that'll help that'll not only help you in your recruitment, but probably more importantly, help in your adjustment to the college game once you get there. So
Yeah, that's great. Hey, Brian, we're just out about time. I really appreciate all the opportunity. This is Brian Bacharach, co-head coach of the men's team at Fordham University. Just giving us more information about the recruiting process in general. This is Damon Newman from American Water Polo. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and AmericanWaterPolo.org. And it's important to stay connected to what's important to you.